of course, want to associate myself with all the previous speakers' sentiments. I think there's some specifics that I would call attention to. I think that we need to acknowledge that there is a profound amount of pathogenic religion in America. That is sick religion. America doesn't have a monopoly on it. Certainly there are sick expressions by people who call themselves religious and who wrap themselves in the mantle of being good Muslims, good Jews, good Christians. But in fact, they are dangerous people. They teach dangerous ways of following Christianity, Judaism, Islam, etc. We need to acknowledge that. We also need to acknowledge that there are, for some reason, in parts of our society, training grounds for murderers that are quite dangerous. Something that contributes to that is our crazy and inexplicable checkmate vis-a-vis the question of guns. I was just on the way here. My excuse, Dr. Namazikhah, for being late is that I was listening to NPR, where I worship regularly. And they were talking about how opposing gun control is a political non-starter. And I just don't know what to say when the Democrats can't oppose it because it won't help them, because the people who are going to vote for them anyway will. And the Republicans can't think of a gun that shouldn't be in everybody's backyard. Then we are at a political deadlock. We need to be very specific about the need to take away guns from people, and no amount of the attempt to do checks, I think, will answer. Finally, I think we need to acknowledge that we have a training ground for something else, and that is fascism. If you read the story about Page, the man that did the killings last Sunday, and you read about Fayetteville, North Carolina, and you heard about how the American Army began to crack down on people with certain kinds of tattoos and certain kinds of attitudes, and to pull them out of the Army, you have to acknowledge that the people that are being invited into the armed services, the people who are being invited to carry guns officially and being trained to use those things, are often a breeding ground, and I don't know why, and I don't have the answers, for a terrible form of American fascism. I don't know what to call it. People call it Aryan nation organizations, but we need to understand who these people are. And here I'm going to say something that will not be popular, so I may be going home early today. In America, the people who are most responsible for our society are the various Christian denominations. And they have a tremendous responsibility in confronting the sick use of Christianity. I'm not saying that people on this panel or their compatriots are involved in it, but I must say that they are the ones who are responsible more than others for this. And while certainly it's good to hear from outraged Muslims, and it's good to hear from outraged Jews and Sikhs, etc., this is a Christian problem in America, and we need to address it as such. It is a religious problem. And I don't have an answer, but I want to point to this with some humility and with some anger. I spend most of my time now working in Poland. It's not a likely place for Jewish communities to reroot, to grow again, and for there to be Jewish life. But as a matter of fact, that's happening. 3 doors down from our synagogue in Warsaw is a mosque where I go regularly. One of the good things about mosques in most of the places in the world is they have good food that you can buy. And you know what it's like to be in Poland, where they have just that stuff that they serve. Everything is pork this and pork that. But you can go down the street and there are pitot and there are halva and the things that is necessary for a good Mediterranean diet. So I'm there regularly. And so people know me by now, and I feel at home. I'm greeted as a brother. One of the things I'm struck by is that in this society, Polish society with all of its problems and history and so forth, there is a profound attempt to look in a very hard and honest way at its past. Next to Germany, Poland is probably the country that is making the greatest attempt to understand its past. I'm not saying that everybody in Poland is doing this, but a very important sector of the society is saying we need to take an honest look at our past. So when I, as an American, look at the past of America, I think the past of slavery contributes here. The past of racism contributes here. The past of the genocide of Native Americans, Indians, contributes here. The treatment of the Chinese workers contributes here. We have to look at that as part of the picture. And while I love to be inspired by religion, and I share, on other days, Fiske gives my talk, I give his talk. I want to now look not at what gives us a license for goodness. I'm pretty clear about that. What I want to look at is what is it that gives people a license to hate and to murder and to move away from what they were taught not to do.
I agree with what Haim says, that there are training grounds out there for evil, but also there are training grounds for good. Last Sunday, my wife and I met at the First Congregational Church in Long Beach with the local mosque there in Long Beach, and entire families came out, adults and children, and we were distributing food and materials and supplies to the poor. It was Humanitarian Day, which is a Muslim organization that the Ilm Foundation has set it up, and throughout Southern California, they meet and distribute goods and aid, even medical help, to the poor and the needy. And this morning, Judy and I got up and we went to our church services, the Mormon services, and then we came up here to Skid Row, 4th and Town, and a whole street was blocked off. And there they were celebrating Humanitarian Day also. And it was mostly young adults, but there were a lot of younger children there, but it was mostly young adults, 100 or more of them that were lined up on the street, and all of the people who on Skid Row were coming through, and as they would approach the street there, of course they were hunched and hunkered down and discouraged and depressed, and these Muslim youth applauded them and said welcome and smiled and greeted them as they came in. And you could see the change as those people walked in amongst those youth. They would start standing up and standing a little straighter, and they were blessed by the whole experience. And here, youth who are fasting were passing out water, no food or drink for themselves. They were passing out water and food to the homeless. And besides that, clothing, the medical corps there was providing medical assistance to them. These young people are being trained in a different type of training. They're getting a taste of service. They're feeling the joy of giving and helping other people. People who are very different from them, but people in need. And the Mormon youth and the Muslim youth this past year in Orange County got together and set up a program where the Mormons and the Muslim youth went to different markets, and they passed out little sheets in front of the market that said on there, we're collecting food for the poor. We need these items. Would you pick up some of these items and bring them out and give them to us? And so they had truckloads of food that canned goods and other food that were donated, and these youth got a taste of something better than what they get at home on their computers or their cell phones and other areas. They got a taste of humanity. And so yes, I agree that there is the evil that we need to stand up against, but I think the media needs to get involved. There were no cameras from the newspapers there today. They publicized the terrible stuff, but there's a lot of good that's going on, and we need to let our people know that there is a lot of training ground for good that's going on at the same time, and to promote it and to encourage it.
I cannot agree more with all the distinguished speakers prior to me on all the issues that they raised. I absolutely agree on the question of training ground. What are the training grounds for all these Islamophobia, xenophobia, and terror in the society? But I want to emphasize on two important issues that I think are more relevant to the question of training grounds, and that's one is the marginalization of certain communities in the United States, Arab, Muslim, Middle Eastern, South Asian communities are being and getting marginalized in a very fast pace. In this context, when you have this marginalization, then you have the highest number of hate groups being recorded in the United States history. And that's more than 1,000 hate groups, active hate groups. In the last year, according to the FBI report, the number of hate groups against Muslims has increased 300%. And now, again, according to the FBI reports, the hate crimes against Muslims has raised 50% in the past 2 years. So we have a marginalization of certain communities in our society, and at the other hand, you have the increase of hate groups, active hate groups, and then we suddenly see someone like Wade Michael Page having a tattoo of commemorating of 9/11 and being the head of a white supremacist group. And probably what we don't know is he didn't care about the Sikhs. I mean, he didn't know if Sikhs were Muslims or not, or it mattered at all at the first place. But the problem is, as long as we decide to deliberately ignore the presence and the role that these communities play in our society, it's inevitable to see these type of activities and terrorists against. I can go, in long distance and cite several surveys conducted by very reputable organizations telling about the realities of American Muslim community. But those facts, I mean, the best that you can imagine among any other religious group in the society, in the United States. But those facts do not retract a paranoid, fringe portion of society, I don't know, from indicting American Muslims on almost anything. I mean, anything. Salam mentioned Michelle Bachmann. I mean, her very outrageous claim of Muslims infiltrating the United States administration. I want to read another representative's, thoughts. I don't know if you can call it thought. He says, he's John Walsh, representative from Illinois, a Republican, says, there is a radical strain of Islam in this country trying to kill Americans every week. There is a real threat that is much more at home now than it was after 9/11. Now, listen to this part. I mean, this is more relevant to our panel. Walsh also called, I mean, I'm reading a news report. Walsh also called for an end to political correctness among godly representatives willing to oppose the expansion of Islam, which he asserted is not the peaceful, loving religion we hear about. Michelle Bachmann raised $1 million in less than a month after she made those outrageous claims. It's a very, lucrative cottage industry to be anti-Muslim, be anti-reason, I want to say, to be irrational. But when it comes to our faith, I believe all of us here in the panel agree on and find similar verses in their sacred text, in the sense that Quran has said, if you kill one innocent soul, it's as if you have killed the whole humanity. And a sick, innocent, sick man being murdered by a white supremacist or whatever he is, just because that criminal has acted out of his mind or whatever reason, it's as if he has killed all humanity. And we respect all the members of religious faith in the United States. I believe we all respect the importance of a single soul of those six individuals that were murdered in Oak Creek.